Welcome to the Newsmakers Podcast. I'm Billy Hollowell, and this is a show where we go behind the headlines every day to bring you an interview with a pastor, entertainer, politician, or other notable news figure. And this is a show, again, it's daily, but it's based on our weekly TV show, which is also called Newsmakers. You can watch it on the CBN News channel and also on our YouTube page. And on this show, every day, we dive deep. It's a little more longer form with one of the people who you will often see on our Newsmakers show or across the CBN News platforms. On today's Newsmakers, Christy Shamblin's daughter-in-law, Marine Sergeant Nicole Gee, was one of the 13 American service members killed in an ISIS-K terror attack during the chaotic August 2021 U.S. pullout from Afghanistan. She's still processing the earth-shattering loss, and she's joining us today to talk about her interactions with the Biden administration, or the lack thereof, and why she and her family are continuing to be vocal about that Afghan pullout. With no further ado, here is Christy Shamblin. Well, Christy, I appreciate you taking the time to come on with me. I know it's been a very hectic couple of weeks with the State of the Union. You were also at the hearing this week about the Afghanistan pullout. But before we get into any of those details, I want to start with Nicole, your daughter-in-law. And she was a Marine sergeant. She was one of the 13 lost during the terror attack that happened amid that chaotic pullout from Afghanistan. Again, before we get into those details, what can you tell us about Nicole and who she was?
Thank you so much. Sergeant Nicole Gee, my daughter-in-law, was a superstar. She was dynamic and amazing. She had a positive mental attitude, and she expressed that to everybody she came in contact with. She was incredibly proud of her service in the Marine Corps and her involvement at the Abbey Gate. She knew she was saving lives, and she was extremely proud. And there's nothing you want more for your kids than to have them be proud of what they're doing, you know. She was amazing.
You know, and as those events were unfolding and that pullout was happening, you know, take us back. And I know it's painful, but I want to talk about just what it was like to see on the news what was going on, and then to find out what had happened to her. How did you process that?
It's a work in progress, I would say, still. You know, she was communicating with us, and again, just so proud of what she was doing. She was sharing with us the desperation that she saw there, and how proud she was to be helping those most vulnerable. So it was that strange, bittersweet feeling, because we're so proud of her and what she did and what she felt there. But then you saw on the news that it was chaos. It was collapsing. And what I think now is that they all knew that, but they were still there on the ground, proud of their job, given 100%. And that's the spirit of our armed forces. And we're very proud of them.
Heroes. I mean, these are heroes in the midst of an impossible situation. And you have been very vocal in speaking out, and, you know, you've done interviews, you've shown up, you were at the State of the Union, and, you know, making sure, and I don't want to speak for you, but from my vantage point, making sure that people are held to account and that people understand who Nicole and the others were, and asking questions of why this happened the way that it did. What was the State of the Union experience like for you?
Disheartening. It again, this bittersweet theme goes through all of it. I met amazing people, and we have amazing, honorable people in our system. They're being drowned out right now, and it's hard to see that happening. And you know, to what end? I just don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, when it came to when it came to the speech itself and President Joe Biden, what he delivered and what he had to say, what were you expecting? What was your take on what was uttered, being that you were there in the room?
You know, I have pretty low expectations these days. I wasn't surprised. He, you know, it doesn't flow together. It's not relevant what he's speaking about to what is in the room, to what's happening in the country. I feel like he's disconnected from what the people are concerned about. And it's hard to see that. I think that largely they've lost sight that, the people that fight these wars are young men and women who sacrifice their lives, and they don't get the respect. We don't even get attention from our administration, much less respect.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, you had done recently a CNN interview, and it was a really surprising moment. Airtime is filled with conversation and it's free flowing, but there was a moment where you were asked a question, you responded, and there was dead airtime for a few seconds. And the question, paraphrasing, was the anchor asking you essentially, President Biden is known as the comforter in chief, essentially. He has comforted many families based on what he's gone through with his son, losing his son. Of course, not in war, but to disease. And if you had experienced that same thing, your family, that comfort, and your response was no. And there was, again, that dead silence after. Let's talk about that response. Why did you respond with a no? And tell us about what communications have been had. Obviously, Nicole being one of the 13. Did you hear anything from the Biden administration? Have you interacted with them at all?
Yeah, that interview was awkward. I'm not a person who, I don't know how to fill time, but we haven't been reached out to. The president was at Dover Air Force Base, and that was the first and only and last interaction we have had with our administration. We've never seen the vice president anywhere or had any interaction. We've actually reached out to the White House when we did our roundtable in March of last year in DC. We reached out to them, in an effort to find out how they can call this a success. I don't know everything. I only know my part of the story. So, we'd like to hear, how do you call this a success? And we have never received even a response. So it's confusing.
Well, a couple of things. It's not your job to fill airtime at all, right? So I thought your response, you were asked a yes and no question and you gave your answer and the answer was no. And I think it was a surprise probably to that anchor, it seemed to be. And so it was an effective conversation in that I think it brought forward the fact that you would assume as an outsider, right? I would assume you would have had multiple communications from the administration, checking on your family, seeing how you're doing. So outside of that one interaction, you are saying, just to underscore this, that there has not been conversations, there's not been interaction, there has not been condolences coming directly to you from the president or even somebody lower than him in the administration.
Nope, zero. We have, as family and individually been reached out to by Congress people, by senators, by we have had the outpouring from people in, lower, positions, but nothing from the administration or the White House directly.
You mentioned a couple of the questions that you have. What are the biggest questions that you and your family have as a result of, here we are now, this is 2021, it is 2024. You have said you have not received responses. What are the big questions that you have?
They've changed over time. And, to be honest, a lot of our questions have been answered, but not by our administration. The Marines on the ground have come out to us and shared their experiences, and the heartfelt remorse that they have is what I would expect from our administration, but we have not gotten it. Our questions now revolve around, how do we make this never happen again? This was an evacuation. It was a peaceful evacuation. What went wrong? How did we have the second largest mass casualty of the of the Afghanistan war, and nobody's finding how to fix it next time?
Yeah, that's an important question, right? Because you have this traumatic event happen that affects you, obviously, personally, your family, but this broader question of how do we stop this from impacting any other family, any other service member, any other individual? You were at, as I mentioned, the House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing that unfolded, and a lot was said during that. Was there anything there that shocked you, surprised you, or that stood out to you in any way that you heard during that hearing?
Nothing was shocking. They were pretty much, the same answers we had had before. I am encouraged that the generals are reaching out and offering their help. And, I'm hopeful that that can lead us to, getting these answers. It's somewhat disappointing to always sit in those rooms and to notice one side of the room very empty, and the other side of the room, having people that show up. And for me, it's hard, to look at that, because our system is one big United States of America. And right now it feels like it's completely pulled apart, and all they do is point fingers back and forth at each other. And in the meantime, our kids are dying.
Yeah. And I want to go back to Nicole for a moment, because I feel like in these situations, so much of what happens is the conversation, and these are important conversations, it ends up not being on the person, or you don't hear enough about her. And when I think about the loss that you've gone through, I mean, how has the loss of Nicole, the death of Nicole, impacted you and your family?
Our lives will never be the same. She was our light, but she was also a light for so many other people. We've changed everything about how we live with her loss. We won't be the same people ever again. And our goal now, with her spirit of having a positive mental attitude, is to kind of switch that into being a positive change. And that's not easy or something that we want to do, but we're going to do it because she's watching.
And you have been very brave. I mean, listen, getting on TV networks, talking to people, doing what you're doing right now, this is not easy. It's very difficult. I think it's easy for people outside of it to not understand the complexities of what comes along with being vocal and open and challenging these sorts of things and asking these questions. Has that been difficult, being vocal? And is it something you plan to continue doing?
It is difficult, and I will continue to do it. We've actually had conversations. We have a group of, there's currently 6 of us parents that have formed a group called the Abbey Gate Coalition. And it is hard, but our kids were not afraid, and we're not going to be afraid. And we have each other, and that's the family that we've formed as Gold Star families is a hard one, and a family nobody wants to be in, but we have each other's backs.
And that's so powerful to have community. And I don't always do this during interviews, but I do want to do it because I think it's important. And in the question I'm just going to close with for you is, how can people pray? Because there are a lot of people out there, they want to pray for your family. They want to pray for you. How can people be doing that? What are the things that they could be praying for as you continue to navigate this loss?
Pray to bring God back. Bring him back into our government, bring him back into our military, bring him back into every aspect of our lives, because we have lost sight. And we can get it back. The people run this show. We just have to get stronger and more outspoken and remind the powers that be that we're watching and this is important to us.
Absolutely. Well, Christy, we would love to have you back anytime. Appreciate you taking the time to join us and discuss all of these important issues. And we will be praying for you on those things and for our country as well. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
That's all for today's Newsmakers podcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode of the show, and also head over to the CBN News YouTube channel and the CBN News channel to watch Newsmakers every week. We'll see you soon.